Spent a few weeks ago that there was an occasion for myself and Jim and Jeff to be together, and we were with one other individual. The conversation got around to the characteristics of the eldership just a little bit, and I think it was half in jest, but I'm not so sure. The observation was made by the fourth in the party. Well, now Jim, he's the fatherly figure, and he's very, very good at feeling with people, and he's getting more tender-hearted as he gets older. And Jeff, he's just an old softy anyway. But Jeff's good at that tenderness, and when we talk and we get that characteristic from him. And then, well, Greg, you're the hard one. You're the one that doesn't have any emotion. You're very analytical. So I've thought about that a little bit, and I decided, Jeff talked to one-on-one with you this morning, so this evening I'm talking to myself, and you're allowed to listen in on the conversation that goes on inside my head. And I hope that that's fruitful for you, but we'll see. Do I have to touch anything? Oh, that's mine. I brought my own tech support. Thank you. So the word I landed on for this evening is empathy. And after this past week, I got to rethinking around Thursday or Friday. Well, we've been talking about a lot of good things about, the way that we conduct ourselves and how that affects our joy as Christians. And I think Gene brought us to try to open our eyes to a greater, more fulfilling experience as a Christian. And part of that is the love that we have for one another, and how to appreciate giving love and how to appreciate receiving love as part of our Christian walk. This word empathy, I sort of landed on after thinking about some of the things that were said and some things he said. And there's going to be some overlap between myself and Jeff this morning, and some things we heard from Gene this week. But empathy is not to be confused with sympathy. It sounds like a very similar word. But empathy is actually more related to compassion. Sympathy is basically an expression, for the most part, an expression of a sorrow as another sorrows. And empathy is a little broader than that. So empathy is generally defined as the ability to discern and vicariously experience the thoughts and feelings of another person, or more simply, just to feel what other people feel. And so if you're the analytical, cold one, you would have more difficulty with feeling what other people feel. And we'll hopefully come to understand why this is very important. This is a very important topic. And like I said, I've looked at myself and trying to self-examine. I can ask my wife, but I don't want the truth. I don't want to hear what she's got to say about it. But to self-examine and to say, what am I doing to project an image of calculating coolness, not a lot of emotion, and how's that affecting my relationships with other people? So empathy is the ability to feel how another feels. This definition says it's a measure of discernment, because I can read you wrongly. I can think you're having a great time and you're miserable, or the other way around. I could read you incorrectly. I cannot understand the emotions behind your actions and your words and your thoughts. But it's then also deeper than that. It's actually to put oneself in another person's shoes so that you feel what they feel. And that's the part that's very difficult, but also very, very critical to the mission that we have to express empathy one towards another. Philippians 2, we just heard in our reading. If there's any encouragement in Christ, any comfort from love, any participation in the Spirit, any affection and sympathy, complete my joy, being of the same mind, having the same love, being in full accord and of one mind. And then also I'll look quickly at 1 Peter 3, verse 8. Finally, all of you have the unity of mind, sympathy, brotherly love, a tender heart, and a humble mind. I'm going to flip back. When we look at these two readings, here in Philippians and over in 1 Peter, and we think about what that unity of mind is, we go, okay, unity. We understand unity. Unity's talking about, reading the Scripture and understanding it to mean the same thing and having no disagreements among doctrine. And that's something we strive for sure. Absolutely. It's something we seek and something we can reach. It's not outside our ability to be of the same mind in regards to doctrine. But if you look at what this says, if this was a discussion about doctrinal unity, then the word choice is all wrong. We would be reading about a unity of one's faith, or more specifically, the unity of the faith. And we would see phrasing like one Lord, one faith, one baptism, like we do in Ephesians. And that would be a discussion of doctrinal or biblical unity. But those words are not here. These words are talking about a unity of mind, sympathy, brotherly love, a tender heart, a humble mind. So these are elements of reaching unity of mind. It has to be beyond just a unity of doctrine. It can't be just the doctrine that unites us. That's the beginning point. That's the foundation. But that is not the whole of being of unity of mind in the spirit of unity. That's not the whole of it. That's just the start. That's just the foundation. Okay? Colossians 3:12 then says, put on then as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience. Sounds like an imperative to me, meaning a command. When we talk about empathy, I do believe there is a natural tendency for some people to have more empathy than others. But some people have worked at it harder than others. Some people have developed the skills more so than others. And in the letter to the church in Colossia, it's an adding to. You see, it's a building or a progression. Put on these things, holy ones, God's chosen people. Compassion, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience. And these are things that make for unity of the Spirit. Unity of purpose. If I can't feel where it is you're coming from, we may have a discussion that stays at an intellectual, doctrinal debate level, and we may never make a true meeting of the minds because we haven't delved past that which is the structural of what we're looking at, and delved into how does God's word make us feel? How does God's word make us feel toward others? About ourselves? About the ability to forgive ourselves? What makes us love one another? What's the motivation? What's behind our feelings? What makes us hate each other? What's the motivation for that? What is behind our feelings? And in order to have unity of spirit, we've got to work on these things which are tools in our toolbox for empathy. These are the tools in one's empathy toolbox, and how to connect, how to feel as another person feels. And we'll look at some of this. Compassionate hearts. Ready to take this empathy, this desire to understand the feelings behind a person's words and actions, and maybe even whatever they're willing to express to their mind. But take that empathy of understanding and take the feelings of others, and then you internalize those. You take them into your own heart. And it's only natural that if you are a compassionate person or are working towards compassion, if you take someone else's pain into yourself, your only gut reaction is we need to alleviate this pain. We need to feel better. This hurts. And so it is through compassion and empathy and understanding. You will experience things I will never fully appreciate. But I can take experiences in my own life, or even the observation, even my experience of seeing human suffering. And I can understand those things, and I can learn to develop empathy so that when you hurt, I hurt too. So that when you're in pain, I feel your pain. Now that sounds trite, but this is biblical. Okay? This isn't a political hack statement. This is biblical. And when I feel your pain, the next logical step is, how can I help someone stop from hurting? What can I do? How can I step in? Can I comfort that person? Can I provide some sort of relief in some way? Can I take their burden upon me, or at least part of it? Can I just be a listening ear that says you're not alone in this? I've never gone through what you've gone through. But what can I do to then take that pain away? And my drive, my interest in helping you feel better will be directly because I'm helping myself feel better. If I feel your pain, when I relieve your pain, I'm relieving my pain too. And so what's my motivation? I want us both to feel better. Grieve when someone grieves. Rejoice when someone rejoices. And if we have empathy, if we can feel the pain, we'll want to take it away. If we can feel the pain, and I am the cause of the pain, if I'm the one that's giving you grief, well, then that raises it to a whole new level. If I'm the one that's dishing out your discomfort, let's use real words. If I'm the one dishing out your discomfort, if I'm the one that's putting you through something, I have to detach myself from how that makes you feel in order to continue in that behavior. But if I've learned empathy and I've learned how to feel how others feel and feel it myself and experience it vicariously myself when others hurt, well, then when I start looking around to stop the pain, I got to stop myself. I got to stop being the one that's the source of whatever the aggravation is. So that's one huge benefit right there. Because it's our tendency as human beings to cause more pain and struggle with those that we know and are close to and love than complete strangers. That's just what we do as people. I don't have a solid, good explanation as to why we act that way, other than maybe selfishness. It's the only word that comes to mind. But that's part of the nature of the human condition. When the guy down the road is mistreating someone else, I may see that. I think that's terrible. If it's 100 miles away, I don't even know about it. If it's on the other side of the world, it's not affecting me at all, or anyone I know. We have a tendency to have most negative impact and the most positive impact on those that we know. Kindness, the key to empathy, is caring enough about someone to desire to understand and experience their feelings from my own perspective. I want to treat others as I wish to be treated. And that's paramount to empathy as a tool towards unity, is being kind. And understanding, I like it when you're kind to me. I appreciate that. I can put myself in the place of, yeah, it's nice when people do nice things for me. Joy wants to write at me with a pen. She wants to write at me with a red pen, and I say, stop that. But even when I do that to Joy, I still appreciate the attention. Makes you feel good. And someone's wanting to express a measure of kindness to you. Treat others as we wish to be treated. That's so important. It's critical. But who doesn't want to be understood, first and foremost? You know, a lot of us can bear up under burdens when we feel like other people get it. And when we feel like no one else gets what it is I'm going through, it just makes it all that much more difficult. I've seen all kinds of studies and helps for how to treat people at work. Most people leave work because they think no one understands what it is they go through at work. The work's the work. They'll get the work done. They can follow directions. They can do this. But when they usually are done with the job, I'm over it, I'm ready to go, it's when no one wants to understand how they feel about the work. You would think it's work. No one who has feelings about work. But we do. And when we feel like we're being taken advantage of, or we feel like, I should have a say in how this task is done. It's the task I have to do every day. But then if you're misunderstood and no one wants to get the time to know and understand what you go through day to day at work, that's when people leave. People will do horrible, dirty jobs when they feel like they're appreciated and understood. But even the cushiest position, people won't put up with that. Having a tender heart, being open to feelings. A tender heart is one that is easily bruised. A tender piece of fruit. You pick them up at the grocery store, or I do, and you start to squeeze on, and your thumb goes right through a peach that's half rotten, and you kind of slip that one back on the pile, when no one's looking. But that which is tender can be easily bruised. There's a vulnerability to having a tender heart. And again, this was part of our reading a minute ago. I'm not making up these words. There's a vulnerability, there's a risk to most of us, if not all of us, in being tenderhearted, because it opens up the secret places. And Jeff used this morning the house plan. And he had just one little cabinet somewhere in the kitchen, I think it was. And said, that's my secret place, Lord. That's where I'm going to store the things that aren't out for public consumption. And if you'll give me just that secret place. And he put it in a cabinet, and I was thinking, oh, and it's a closet. That's where you put your secrets, in the closet. Yeah? Oh, that's closeted. Something came out of the closet. Some scandal was in the closet. And it's dark. Closets are dark, or my closets are dark. Maybe yours are well lit. But we have secret places. And on both anytime there's interaction between two people, there's a risk at finding those secret places in our hearts. Because they may be full of things that no one expected. They may be full of feelings that go back years and years. And they've grown in that dark closet all this time. And, some of you have flipped houses or been in other people's places or whatever, and you find these places and you go, man, there's something funky growing in here. And it just festers and gets worse, and it's closed up, and it's never aired out. Musty, damp, dank. And we have the opportunity, the vulnerability to either see that or expose that which is in our heart. Empathy is about being bruised. You will be hurt. You will be hurt. And you have to learn how to take it. Someone's got to be the adult in the room. Someone's got to be mature in our relationships, If it's two kids bantering back and forth, we'll never get anywhere. But someone's got to be the adult. Having a humble mind. It's really arrogant if I think that I'll pick on Stan, because he's right here. And I think, oh, Stan, he's like an open book. I can read him. I always know what's on his mind. I've got him all figured out. Really? I mean, Stan could spend hours probably telling me stories and filling me into things of his family and talking about all kinds of subjects, and I still wouldn't know everything about Stan. We spend a lifetime getting to learn one person. That's called marriage most of the time. Do you know everything about your spouse? I'm not smart enough to know everything about my spouse. 31 years last September 30th. Yeah, September 30th. And you guys are October 1? 57 years. And still, humility is saying, I don't have you all figured out. Because if I shortchange and don't take the time to learn the motivation behind the exchanges, words and actions, if I don't take the time to do that, what I'm really saying is, your feelings don't matter. But I'm just going to assume what I think I know about you and fill in all the blank spaces in my understanding with my assumptions. And then when there is something that is a simple exchange, it can get blown way out of proportion due to a lack of empathy. I haven't learned how to listen and appreciate what's the motivation behind what's going on. Because it's easier just to not take the time to do it and assume that you've got it all figured out, and then you get yourself in real trouble. Humility doesn't leap to false conclusions. We need to take the time to be humble in our relationships with one another so that we can fully understand each other. Patience. Empathy takes time. Empathy seeks to learn and make mistakes throughout the relationship. So empathy is not the perfect, shortcut to building lasting relationships. Because even when you're listening and watching and probing, you still make mistakes. But that shouldn't be holding us back. If we do so with patience, we see that a poor attitude or a sharp word that will even in a good, healthy relationship may occasionally crop up. We want to overlook that. I've got 10, 15, 20, 30, 50 years history with some of you in here. 50 years plus. I don't remember much of being 6 years old. I don't remember much of last week. But I've got 50 plus years experience with some of you. And if I say one thing that's uncharacteristic or off color, or you take it as, that sounded like a jab to me, I like to tease people. Everyone knows that, I hope. But I can carry it too far. But are you going to let 50 years of experience with me color what you heard me say the last time I spoke? Or are you going to take it in the context of, well, I think I know his heart. I think I know his feelings. And I'm not going to let that one untoward thing just mess everything else up. Because empathy is about being patient with another person's emotions. And an emotional response is not a pure response like mathematics or physics, or if you didn't pollute your vials and your test tubes, chemistry. You get the same result every time. But with emotions, you don't get that. Because something else happened, good or bad or indifferent that day. And it flavors, it tinges or taints that emotional response. So it's a little different than what you're accustomed to. And patience says, okay, they had a bad day. Maybe I caused the bad day. That's especially a good time to be patient. Patience appreciates that daily stresses weaken our resolve to be kind and always appreciate others. And so it puts new light on the situation in order for us to cope patiently with one another. Empathy is not. It's not an attempt to understand a person's feelings in order to manipulate them or guilt trip them. Luke chapter 15 and verse 20 talks about the prodigal son returning to his father. And the father has been watching now for a period of time for his son's return. Gene talked about this, didn't he, during the week? He's watching for the son's return with eager anticipation. And that kid comes walking up, and he's my kid, and I go, man, what did I tell you? Here you come dragging yourself back with your tail between your legs. I knew this was going to happen. What did I tell you? Didn't you ever listen to me? And that prodigal son knows exactly how he feels. He feels like a slave. He feels like he's disinherited his own father. And you think that's the right time to jump on that person and start manipulating that? He already feels bad. And the father knows that. But he's not using his understanding of his emotions in order to crush his spirit. Make him feel any worse than he is. And we do that. But rather the father feels compassion. It was a feeling. You mean the father's response was not rational? Was his response rational? Not really. His response was based on his love for his son that was unconditional. And it's not a rational thing. He didn't react to the stimuli and take that chance to further beat down that son that had returned home. But he acted irrationally, and he let his emotions get the best of him, and he kissed him, and he welcomed him home. Empathy is not, well, the kids will say, my parents, they don't get me. They don't understand. Those people at church, they just look down, and they don't get it. We want to try to understand people, and I throw kids in there. It could be anybody. Kids here, kids. I don't even know what a kid is. Maybe you're 30 and I think you're a kid. And okay, that's my fault. That's not yours. But as a young person, you say, well, he's Andrew's dad. He's getting old. He doesn't hear very well anymore. He doesn't really keep up with things too much. I don't really, feel a close affinity. I don't feel a close relationship with this guy. But are we trying to say, well, we need to understand the kids so that we can lecture some more? Or is it really, empathy should be about a genuine attempt to really understand how people feel. And I actually took the time in my study here to sit back and think, what was high school like? What did I feel in high school? And that was some of the deepest cobweb recesses in my mind. Very little of high school will come back to me because I am old, But I sat and tried to think about that, and I thought, high school to me, now your experience may be completely different, but high school to me was a time of uncertainty and confusion, and I was bewildered by the whole thing. My grades weren't the worst, but they weren't great. And I kind of just stumbled through school without really applying myself too much, at least in high school. But I remember feeling very much on my own at school. And I had what I thought was a friend circle. And high school, at least when I was there, was tend to be very cliquish. And usually there was not a great deal of overlap between these friend circles. Well, I was on the jocks, right? That's what you're thinking? No, I wasn't with the jocks. I wasn't a sports kid. Band geek a little bit, but I even dropped band. That's how bad it was. Dropped out of band. Come on. But I was alone. And I really felt like I didn't know what I was doing there. Maybe you've had similar experiences. Maybe you didn't. Maybe you loved high school and you had a bunch of friends and you really felt like you fit in. And I felt completely the oddball at school. I remember there was one other young lady who I thought, oh, she's about as oddball as I am. Very much a loner. She went on to be mayor of Columbus. Kind of didn't work out very well in terms of her relationships with other people. Thinking, am I in the same boat as that? You know, some of those characteristics, a lot of your personality is formed by the time you're, 4, 5, 6 years of age. Pretty young. Maybe Becky will give me a chart and show me what that is. But a lot of our personality traits and characteristics are formed at a very young age. And I just felt adrift. Now I say all that to say, when it comes to trying to relate to another generation, I need to try to remember what that felt like for me. And maybe there will be a connection there and maybe there won't. But it can't be a disingenuous attempt to, again, I want to reach people when really what I really want to do is just lecture them. I don't really want to get to know them. I don't really want to have a relationship. I just want to kind of tell them what to do. And that doesn't work for your own kids very well, and that doesn't work with anyone else's kids either. Empathy is not quarreling over religious opinions, and I think Jeff covered this morning. If you're, it's hard enough to be convicted and worrying about how others might look upon our convictions, especially if we are less than sure about ourselves. But what we're doing is we're still trying to our best to please God by holding true to those convictions we have, even if we're unsure about the steadfastness of that conviction. And by that I mean, you may hold a belief and practice on religious opinion, but you may not have a terribly strong opinion. It may be a moderately strong opinion, or I lean this way over that way in my understanding. And there's nothing in terms of religious opinion, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing that says that everything that we have a religious opinion on has to be grounded in cement and can't change over the course of time. But if I am one of those individuals who has an opinion that, well, I can see the other side of that, but I understand from Scripture too that I don't want to be false in my convictions. So I want to hold to them. But empathy is not about, they're just wrong, and if I explain it right enough times, they're going to change and see it my way. I'm not talking about doctrine, I'm talking about opinion. But a lot of us have different opinions about different things. And a lot of us try to apply, and rightly so, try to apply principles that are in the Gospels to form how we interact with our kids, or how we interact at work, or to govern some sort of situation or relationship. We'll take those principles, and I might be able to find scriptures that support one perspective on a principle, and I might find scripture that supports another perspective, a different perspective. And I take in the balance, and I decide, well, my conviction on this matter of opinion is this. But over the years, I may go a different direction. And that's just part of growing up. We don't want to accept others' opinions and attempt to cause them to doubt themselves, to be distrustful of their own convictions. Empathy is not optional. John 13:34 and 35 says, "A new commandment I give to you, you love one another just as I have loved you. You also are to love one another. By this all people will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. And empathy is in a very real sense the root of love, because it's that part of understanding how to express best your love for another person, that you have this empathy. You want to understand how they feel. How are they going to receive your love? You've got to use the right language of communication. 1 John 4:20 says, if anyone says, I love God and hates his brother, he's a liar. For he who does not love his brother whom he has seen cannot love God whom he has not seen. And that's about understanding people. 1 John 4:20 says, you've got this person right here in your midst and you haven't even built a relationship with them to understand how they feel about things. How can you say you love them who you've seen? But, I love God, but I hate my brother. And that's just silly. Ephesians 5, verses 1 and 2, therefore be imitators of God as beloved children, and walk in love as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us, a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God. And this is much more than just the cross. This is much more than just the cross. Christ loved us and he gave himself up for us. He left heaven. He left the Father. He dwelt on earth. He gave up a whole lot more than just the cross. Empathy is about listening, learning, appreciating, and engaging. Empathy is about investing time, understanding deeply how another person communicates. The voice inflection, a glance, a look, eye contact, body language, breathing. You can tell whether a person is nervous, whether they're shy, whether they're exhausted, whether they're comfortable by their breathing. You can learn things like that. And just a small sidebar, if all of our communication, especially with those we're closest with, is via text, you just left out voice, inflection, body language, eye contact, glance, breathing out of the communication window. All of those factors, all of those elements play into how we communicate with one another. Okay? Empathy is slow to judge and quick to place importance on understanding how imperfect feelings, remember, not logical, illogical, imperfect feelings, how they influence a person's actions. Empathy is aligning one's own emotions with others, experiencing joy and fear and anger and excitement and passion and doubt and conviction and faith and hope and endurance. And we see that in other people. We see that. And we get to draw strength from other people's strength. We get to sap off some of that energy from some of the people who are energetic. But we also get to feel within our own gut those things that other people experience. And it moderates how we treat one another. I do not want to be the cause of other people's pain if it's going to make me hurt too, especially. Empathy is compassion without restraint, forgiveness without counting, favor without merit, acceptance without fault-finding, and vulnerability without reservation. These are all difficult things. These are all hard to do. I read this from a counselor. There were some Christian elements certainly in his writings, but this fellow's named Ken Sandy, I'm going to say it is, I'm not sure. But he wrote back a few years, I recently asked my wife, who demonstrates empathy more consistently, me or our dog, Dawson? Without hesitation, she said, Dawson. She gently added, there are times when you show wonderful empathy, but there are other times when you seem clueless about my feelings or you just jump to counseling me. But Dawson picks up on my feelings flawlessly. And when I'm down, he never fails to comfort me. Now, from all indication, this writer, this counselor, looked like he had a good relationship with his wife. But his wife threw him under the bus for the dog. Allison had farm dogs growing up. And some of those dogs were pretty loyal to her dad. And they would go out and hang out in the barn, and they'd ride the truck to town and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes that's about all the company John Lee had on the farm was the dog. You know, but people like animals because they don't judge. They understand how to show sympathy. I mean, even Lazarus, the dog, was licking the wounds. And that was really an expression of empathy is what that was. It sounds kind of gross, but that's really what that was talking about. The only one who showed empathy for Lazarus, suffering with boils or whatever it was at the rich man's gate, was the dog. And certainly God has regarded us higher than the animals. And I think his expectation for us is a little higher than the animals. We can learn. I mean, we can learn from the ant. He's not a sluggard. We learn from the dog. The dog knows how to empathize. We can do better than the dogs, can't we? Back to Philippians chapter 2. If there's any encouragement in Christ, any comfort from love, any participation in the Spirit, if there's any affection and sympathy, complete my joy, being of the same mind, having the same love, being in full accord and of one mind. I looked up this last part about being in full accord and of one mind. And the original language, I found it difficult to explain, but being of one mind and being of full accord had the connotation of self in that. And I was having a little trouble with some of the definitions, but as I looked at it, I think it was saying to me, when I read this, being of the same mind, having the same love is when someone says, well, I was in that self-same spot 25 years ago when I proposed to my wife. And then I found out a friend of mine proposed to his girlfriend at the same tree at the park. Can you imagine that? That self-same spot. And that idea of that self-same is what's here. And then, so you get from the one who's telling that story that there was a vicarious connection with maybe a coworker or whatever, and they say, you know, why, my first car was a Honda Civic, and then you went out and bought a Honda Civic for your first car. Isn't that something? The self-same model. So, but it's this connection that people make, and we crave that connection. We search for it. And we can offer it to other people too. Well, I like ketchup on my tuna fish too, or whatever. You know, make connections. A vicarious affinity, a feeling that you can say, I feel the way you feel. Isn't that neat? I know how you like tuna salad and ketchup or whatever it is. I know, I understand that. And that's what Philippians is saying, or the letter to Philippians is saying here. Being in full accord and of one mind. This goes far beyond scriptural context. It's about making personal connections. Feeling as others feel. Putting yourself in another person's shoes. It governs the way we act. It governs the way we think. It governs the way we treat one another. Well, I'm going to shut my brain off. I'm going to shut my mind off and stop speaking out of my mind to me. And I hope that you have appreciated some of these thoughts that have rambled through my head about these verses. we need to develop. It is something that can be crafted and practiced and put into practice. I said this morning in relation to one of Jeff's comments, well, that's just the way I am. And I said, Jeff wasn't buying that. I'm not buying that. You want to use that on Judgment Day? Same thing applies here. I don't have empathy. I just don't know how to, I don't understand people. I don't get it. Well, maybe you'll get it someday, but I hope it's not too late. Because I think God expects us to have the ability to empathize and connect with those of the world, with our family, with Christians, all of it. I don't think there's any exclusion here. If you have a need this evening that you would like to express to us, if you seek the prayers of this group, if you look at your own life and say there's something amiss and we'd like to discuss it, we'd like to help you do that. If you've never obeyed the call of the gospel, never been baptized for the remission of sins, we can help you with that this evening as well as we stand and sing.